Okay, so this is a quick tutorial on working with Revit Stairs. And what you can see here is I've got two levels, and I want to connect this potential lobby area or what have you. It's a double volume space with a stair that's going to start someplace on this level 1 and connect up to level 2. So what I'm going to do, there's a bunch of different ways to work with stairs. I'm going to show you the method that I prefer. And as you get comfortable with working with the stair tools, everybody sort of takes the method and begins to work with it on their own techniques. But I'm going to show you the two sort of common methods that I use in terms of building stairs and handrails. So I'm going to start by clicking the stair tool and activating it. And if you notice, the default stair is a 7-11 stair. And I kind of think of stairs when I'm designing them. I usually think of from the top down when I'm working in 3D space. So in other words, where do I want the stair to land on level 2? Where it lands on level 1 is usually a little less relevant, especially if I already have my balcony defined in terms of what's happening with the architecture. But I also know I'm not wild at all about the default Revit stair. If you notice, this is an assembled stair with a 7-11, a 7-inch rise and 11-inch tread. And if you've walked on a lot of stairs or studied a lot of stairs, it's a 7-11 is a really steep stair. That's the code maximum. And if I have an opportunity to design a stair in an open space, my first preference is to always go to a 612. Not only is the math easier, which fortunately with Revit you don't have to worry about, but it's also a much more comfortable stair in my opinion to walk on. So the very first thing I'm going to do is edit type on the stairs, duplicate, and I'm going to change this to a 612 stair as my type. Then I'm going to go ahead and say the maximum riser height is going to be 6 inches. My tread depth is going to be 1 foot. And my minimum run, 3 feet for the width of a stair, is almost obscenely small. That's the size of stair where you're going to have to turn sideways to pass somebody if one person's coming up and one person's coming down. So at least 5 feet as a comfortable width for a stair. Additional things that you can start to look at that we might go through on this tutorial as well. Start to get into the supports and support types. I'm just going to go ahead and leave those as the default right now and say OK. So the basic stair method is going to be using a run. And what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to start by defining my levels first. So I'm in level 2 because, again, I'm kind of working from top down. But what I do want to do is change this. My base level is going to be level 1. My top level is going to be level 2. So what I'm working towards is a stair going level 1 to level 2 in a really simple kind of way. So as I start sketching this, I'm going to see right at the base how many stairs are created and how many are remaining. So I'm simply going to go up to the point where I have 12 risers created, 12 remaining. Now this is a nice sort of simple symmetrical stair. And I'm going to come over to the side, a distance of 10 feet between the two. That's going to give me a nice little gap between the two stairs and create the remaining 12 until I know that there's none remaining. So this makes a really simple U-shaped stair. And let's go ahead and finish that off. And we'll look at it in 3D and see how that's beginning to come together. So I know the basics of that are pretty good. I'm not too crazy about what it's doing with the handrails here and there, but the reality is, when I'm working with handrails, I'm probably going to be doing some custom sketching on handrails to make sure they're built exactly like I want to with a 2D drawing. But one of the things I do recognize right away is that those are handrails, not guardrails. So that is by the default handrail, this sort of picket fence looking thing, is only 36 inches tall, which is a huge no-no. So let's go back. I'm going to edit that handrail type and change it at the very least to one of the guardrails. I'm going to change this to a guardrail pipe. And by saying OK on that, you'll notice it raises the height, and it also gives you another really important piece, which is the handrail at 36 inches and the guardrail height at 42 inches. So that's a much better starting point. And it's at the very least should be what you're considering a default. Ideally, you're diving into this and creating your own sort of custom handrails, but that's a much better starting point as a default stair. Now the next thing you'll notice is the extensions, bottom and top, do not exist. So I want to get into drawing a really simple version of those extensions for you. So if I go to level 1, this is my up direction right here. I'm going to select my handrail and I'm going to edit path. That's going to reduce it down to a line. So any good architect should know that I need a 12-inch extension on my handrail, continuing at the handrail slope. So what I'm doing is I'm drawing a guideline right here that's 1 foot long, and I'm going to take this handrail that's at a slope and I'm going to pull it over to that. So I was just using those lines as a bit of geometry. If we finish that and take a look at it, you can see I now have that extension built, but then I also need a extension. I also need an extension that is level for 1 more foot. So I'm going to go back to my level 1 view, and I'm going to edit the handrail, and I'm going to this time add on a different segment that's going to go 1 foot in length. So what I have is this handrail that is joined with this stair, so it's sort of married to that stair, so I know it's running at a slope, has been extended out 1 foot, or the length of 1 tread. And then I've got one more 1 foot long addition right here that's its own line. And by default, then this is going to be paired with the floor that's already in place. So if I look at that now, I have a stair that's basically to code. There are a few things that still need to happen, like the handrail needs to return to something so that it doesn't have sort of that hooking effect. But I know basically that's set to code. It's modeled in 3D generally correctly. The additional things to get the handrail to meet code typically are things that I would only be worrying about in my 2-dimensional drawing as I do my handrail details. So really quickly to buzz through that again, I'm going to make the modifications to this handrail. So I'm going to go ahead and say edit path, move to my plan view. I'm going to make my 1 foot extension. Drag my grip over, delete my guides, and extend this handrail 1 more foot along its path. So I have those 2 handrails now working correctly. Then up at the top, I need, typically you would see an extension on this as well, 1 foot along the path. But the other thing that can work is continuing the handrail along a balcony edge or something like that. So if there was nothing else going on up here, I would need a 1 foot extension running parallel with the stair. But since I have a balcony, I can actually just begin to wrap that around. So that's going to be my design choice. So going to level 2, what I need to do is just extend this handrail to that edge, which gives me that kind of effect. And eventually, I could argue that, well, maybe I'll just do a guardrail pipe without the handrail. For right now, I'm just going to keep it. I'm more than happy with that. Again, as a 2-dimensional drawing, whatever page this lands on, I would either determine, I'm going to go ahead and end the handrail here, or dive it into one of the other rails, something along those lines. But let's go ahead and leave it as that right now in terms of how I'm modeling in 3D. I'm always sort of a proponent of at some point you have to stop worrying about it in 3D and then worry about the craft of the construction drawings at a later time in terms of what content makes sense as 2-dimensional content. Now, one thing I do want to point out, the handrails that I'm doing for the balcony across here are chained together. So in other words, they are completely continuous. I've got the start of the handrail and everything is end to end. And as long as I'm end to end, that's going to work just fine, despite the little warning message that I'm getting. Oh, I think I was on the wrong level when I built that. See it, put it at the first floor. Let's undo that really quick. The undo button is always your friend. Let's go to level 2. Edit the path. Let's try that one more time. Level 2. And hope that this works. Be kind of a tricky thing if it's not wanting to put that handrail on level 2. Oh wow, that's kind of a new fun thing for me. So if something like this is happening, You know, there's a couple of solutions. I could spend hours trying to figure out what on earth is going on, or I can just draw in a new handrail. And typically that would be my choice. You know, I'm always trying to get things done here. So I'm just going to go edit path. And I could probably rehost this, but I think what I would do instead in this particular case is probably just go ahead and work through adding an additional handrail. So let's go to level 2, and I'll just add on a new handrail here at the top. So I'm going to go Architecture tab, Railing. I'm on level 2. This is the starting point of my handrail, so I can just come across here and here. And one of the things that I was starting to point out when I noticed that there was an error going on with what I was modeling is that these lines are continuous. They're chained together. Something that you can't do is have a gap, 2 different handrails in the same system. It will give you an error message. And the reason why, as best I can tell, is the handrail, it is calculating where the primary balusters are, the structural components that are holding everything up vertically. And it needs a beginning and end to that line in terms of how it's going to work. So you cannot have an inconsistent or a gap in your line that's defining where the handrail goes. So that's the base handrail again. I'm just going to change that to my guardrail pipe. And if you notice, the difference between this one and this one is that handrail, again, is not continuous around this edge. Call it sloppy modeling if you want. It's not perfect by any means. And there are some tools that allow you to begin to clean that up. But for the most part, again, when I detail something like that out, when I do my plan views or my sectional views of those handrails, those are typically something that I'll fix in the 2-dimensional drawing mode. So I'm not terribly worried about that sort of lack of connection right there. I'm not worried about how that's going to show up in a rendering or a walkthrough or something like that. I am happy with that level of detail in my modeling. I would rather move on to my next task. So the other thing that I want to go to with the stair tool is a different method. Let's say that I need a stair with a more complicated shape. So I'm going to go ahead and delete everything that I've got. And let's look at another slightly more complicated, but a little bit more free-form version of how to model a stair. So I'm going to activate Stair by Sketch. And when you're working with a Stair by Sketch, you have a couple of choices. I usually like working with this idea of boundary and riser. So with the boundary and riser, I can start assigning what the edges of my stair are going to do. So I'm going to start sort of with a wider edge and come across. And then let's do something maybe that even works as kind of an arc that's going to sweep out. I don't know why you would want to do this, but you can. It seems like a fun thing to do. So those are my boundaries of this particular stair and how the stair is starting. Now, at the risk of building a stair that's a little bit dangerous, I'm going to make sure that all of my treads are going to be coming in at a right angle with this. I don't want a stair that's sort of you're sliding down sideways or something like that. And also note, you never want to have a stair that's ending more narrow than it starts. That's another code violation that you want to be aware of. But I'm going to go ahead and start this stair. So I'm activating my risers now. I'm going to begin drawing in my risers, and I want them to land perpendicular with that edge. Okay, so if you notice right now I've got 1 riser created, 20 remaining. So with that first one, I'm going to go ahead and use my offset tool now and offset my stairs by 1 foot. And you'll see that each stair that I make, it's going to give me a countdown. So I've got 11 risers created, 10 remaining. Oh, and let's go ahead and change this back to, I'm going to go edit type, duplicate, and let's rename this as 612 stair custom. My minimum tread depth at 1 foot, riser height 6 inches, and OK. So now you notice it's immediately changed my calculations. 11 risers created, 13 remaining. Offset, let's do a few more so I can come down to a landing. Oh, one too many. So 12 risers created, 12 remaining. So I'm going to go ahead and trim these. You don't really have to, but it just kind of neatens everything up. And I'm going to accept that. Let's take a look at what I've got. Oh, and did that completely wrong. So let's see if I can define that base level as level 1. My top level is level 2. And get that sort of working. Okay, so I have something like this working, and again I'm going to change my guardrails to a guardrail pipe. And just in looking at this, I realized I was thinking about this stair coming down. So what I can also do is I want to change the direction of that stair. You notice because it is getting narrower as it goes down, I was designing that thinking about this coming down. So there is a process where I can simply reverse that. And that's this little blue arrow. And I can do this with any of my stairs that I'm working on. Clicking that little blue arrow changes what is the top and what is the bottom. Again, I don't want a stair that as I'm coming down or as I'm exiting the building on the lower level that the stair is getting more narrow. Really, really important code thing there. So I'm going to switch that around. And let's just go ahead and move this around a little bit too. I kind of need to rotate it about 180 degrees. I'm going to select this guy, rotate it around. Let's get it to do a 180. So again, the stairs are pretty easy to edit. I can get them to do all different kinds of things. So now what I want to do in this case is I'm going to make a custom landing on this that then allows me to build the next portion of the stairs going up. So sometimes when I'm working on a stair that's a little bit more complicated, I will only go sort of from landing to landing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my level 2, copy it. I'm going to move it down 6 feet. And let's call this landing, typing, landing 1. Okay, so I can go ahead and go to my level 1. I know right where that top stair is going to land. And I can add in a new floor. So architecture, and then I'm going to go to floor. I'm going to make this a thinner floor. I'm just going to use the default 3-inch lightweight concrete over metal deck. And let's define the landing as a floor here. So rather than putting this on level 1, I'm going to put it on landing 1. And I'm going to work right along the edge of this stair to define my landing. And let's just have it do something like that. I'm going to trim those edges together and say OK, and let's look at what's happening in 3D now. So you can see I've got stair coming up to a landing. Okay, so then what I want to do next is connect this landing to my level 2. So I'm going to start that at my level 2 view. And again, I can go ahead and begin making a stair that's going to start working up to this landing point. So I'm going to go activate the stair tool again, except I activated the wrong version. I want to do stair by sketch. My base level is going to be landing 1. My top level is going to be level 2. So I'm going to begin by working with my boundary. So my boundary is going to be going up in this direction. And again, let's put another edge of a boundary with a bit of a curve where that's going to get wider as it goes down. Something like that. And then I'm going to put my risers in starting right here. So there's my first riser. I'm going to run my offset 1 foot to create the remainder of my risers coming down. 1 remaining right there. I'm going to go ahead and trim this together. You don't really need to, and I don't need to extend those over. It's going to go ahead and make those assumptions for me. The line representing the top of the riser does not intersect one or both of the boundary lines. That's kind of fun. I thought it intersected right there. Let's try that again. That's really odd. Oh, continue. Yeah, that makes perfectly good sense. Let me show you what's happening with that error message. One of my boundary lines is too short right here. It needs to contain. I need boundary lines on both sides of my risers. That's just a really simple mistake on my part. A little bit of confusion there. It should create it this time. Let's look at that in 3D. So I've got that connecting up at the top. I always forget to change my handrail when I actually produce the stair. So let's change that back to the guardrail. And so now you can see I've got those two stairs beginning to come together. And I'd want to do a quick boundary edit on this piece to connect those together. To get that landing working correctly. It's probably more complicated for the quality of design than it should be. In other words, the design's pretty lousy. But it'll give you the idea that you can start making these custom shapes really easily, especially in terms of working with something that's stair to landing, landing to level. As a method. And then again, you know, obviously I need to do handrails around that landing, something pretty easy to do. And again, the things to watch for: handrail extensions, making sure that your stair doesn't get more narrow in terms of what happens at the top to the bottom as you're building these sort of custom shaped stairs.